Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and in today's video let's have a more detailed in-depth look at the brand new comm unit that we have in the iniBuilds A300 since the latest update. We're currently on a flight from Leipzig to London Luton, which by the way is also an awesome scenery from iniBuilds, and we have just entered controlled airspace here on VATSIM, so we are going to lock on to CPDLC now, which is going to be the first thing that we're going to have a look at with the new unit. So, a couple of basics of CPDLC. It is only secondary communication, so we definitely have to keep monitoring voice as we are doing it right now. That is absolutely default part of communications, and CPDLC does not replace that. So let's go ahead and have a look at how we can do that. We've got a couple of basic buttons over here. You will in general recognize that this unit looks pretty much like the FMS on the default CJ4. And the reason is that basically what we have over here is an MCU that's been stripped down for the data link communication, for which it has been repurposed on the A300. So we're going to start with this one now here on the ACARS main page. And over here we can choose whether we want to go into the AOC menu, which is ACARS, or the CPDLC menu, which is, well, controller pilot data link communication. We're going to start with CPDLC here, since we do have a VATSIM controller online at the moment. And we generally start by logging on to the controller. We can do that through the log on status page up here. Now, quite important, you've got origin station and destination station, and those are the airports between which you are flying. That is not the station from air traffic control. So in our case, we're going from Leipzig to Luton, and that is what I've entered down here. This above is our flight ID. That is taken automatically from the flight management system up here. However, rather important to remember, this also has to match your VATSIM lock-on if you want to use that. Now the station up here, CDA, that is the station that we want to log on to. And currently we do have Langen Radar online, and they have CPDLC under the ident of Echo Delta Golf Papa. Now, if you're wondering where to find that kind of information, you can generally find it in the controller information from the controller. So if you have a look in vPilot, then you can find it in there. For example, in my case up here, I clicked on the controller info of the controller in question, and now in here it says Langen Radar, CPDLC, Echo Delta Golf Papa. So this is what you can use in order to log on. And you have to put that right on the top line over here. And when that is done, you send the log on. That sends the data to air traffic control, and now they have to accept our log on. Some do that automatically, others do that manually, so it might take a little while. In general, CPDLC is a rather slow system anyway, so it can take up to a minute for messages to arrive. And indeed, when we are flying across the North Atlantic, we usually have to send the maximum uplink delay to 300 seconds, which is 5 minutes. So only after 5 minutes, if a message is not received, we would actually get an alert, or the controller would get an alert. Alright, so company message received, and you heard that little beeper sound together with the ATC message light up here on the glacial panel. You can click that one away, and this now tells us, hey, there is a new message for you. So now you can go down here into the ACARS message log, and over here we got a little bit of information. So let's start down here. We've got the request lock-on message that we sent to Langen Radar. Then we got the lock-on accepted from him. Then we got the message, current ATC unit, Langen Center. And then he just sent us a message over here, proceed direct to Nogro. And this one we can now either confirm through the Wilco button. We can tell him stand by if we are not sure yet, if we want to take the direct. That would be something we would do, for example, if we would have to consider flying around weather and thus couldn't take the direct. And if we get to the conclusion that we can't take the direct at all, we would go for unable. Now we are going to go for Wilco, and this gives us a verify page, so we verified the entry that we've made. Then we can click on the send button, and now this sends the command will comply down to air traffic control. And air traffic control is going to receive this as our confirmation, and this is pretty much the very same that a readback would be via voice. Now, the company message received prompt down here, you can clear that one away. You might have to do it for every one of those messages you get, so you might have to click the clear button a couple more times. Now, we've got now a direct, so let's go up into the FMS, direct, Nogro, That looks good. Insert that. And now we're going to fly direct to Nogro. Lovely 178 mile direct over here. Alright, so that is the general principle of how to work with CPDLC. Now let's go ahead and have a look into a couple more options that our airplane has fitted. So if we press the ACARS ATC button down here, we go right into the CPDLC menu. And you can see in here, we've already talked about the top page. Now the second page is the ATC log, and this is pretty much the message log that we had earlier here. Now, on this message log, using the previous and the next key, we can scroll through all the messages, but as you can see in terms of CPDLC messages, this is all that we've sent so far. There is a second block that not only includes CPDLC, but also ACARS messages, which we are going to talk about a little bit later. Now, returning to the previous page, down here we got the reports and requests page, and this is probably the most important one for us, together with the message log. Now over here, if we go down here, we got a couple different options. So for example, we have the request altitude, speed or direction, and if we just have a look into that, down here we could request climbs and descents. We could request to fly a certain indicated airspeed or a certain Mach number. Remember, if you want to deviate from the speed that you filed in your flight plan, and you want to deviate by more than 5% of your true airspeed, then you need to request that from air traffic control. You cannot just speed up or slow down on your own. Now down here you got a couple more messages, like fix is requesting direct to a certain waypoint, or down here you can request direct to a nav aid, direct to an airport, or direct to a latitude or longitude position. Now this one here can be particularly interesting when you are flying oceanic. Let's say, for example, you need to deviate around some weather, then you're clear of weather, then you can send him the direct to those coordinates of the next waypoint that you can fly to, and the request over here. Now, you've got a little menu down here where you can include a reason why you are making that request. You don't have to do that, you can simply leave it on none. But for example, it might help if you include something like request that divert due to weather. When you have inserted your request, you go onto the verify page, and then you are going to be able to make your request. Now, let's make an example over here. We're currently cruising in flight level 360. Now, if we go ahead into our progress page, we can see the maximum is 386 and the optimum 361. So we are flying pretty much optimum right now. But let's say we wanted to climb to a higher level. Let's say we want to climb to flight level 380. Then what we do, in order to request that, is we just enter 380, put that into the flight level field. Remember, we are requesting a flight level, not altitude 380 feet. And when we make that insertion, we just go down onto the verify prompt. Now this shows us the entire message that is going to be sent to air traffic control. And now, when we have confirmed this with the other crew member, we're just going to hit the send button, and this is going to submit our request to air traffic control. Now, there are a couple of arrows next to the messages that we can see over here. You've got the arrow pointing downwards and the arrow pointing upwards. Now, those indicate where the message comes from and where it goes to. Any arrow that's pointing downwards is a downlink, so a message from the airplane down to air traffic control, to the ground. Anything with the arrow pointing upwards comes from air traffic control and is directed to the aircraft. Now, you can see over here, we just got the buzzer once again, together with the ATC message light. Can click that away. And when we now have a look down here, we can see that we have received an uplink saying climb to flight level 380. And if we have a look in here, now we need to answer. For example, we are again going to confirm it by saying Wilco, verify that, and then we're going to press the send button. That is going to send the confirmation to air traffic control, and only after that confirmation is sent, that closes the loop in the communication, and now we can go ahead and start our climb to the new flight level. So flight level 380 blue, and we do have P thrust, P climb. So the airplane is now going to start its climb to the higher flight level. So that much about your ability to request messages. The other option you have in here when you go onto the reports and requests is request weather deviation. And if you go onto here, then you can request a certain deviation to the left or to the right of your filed track in order to deviate around weather en route. Now, this is something that is used a lot in the North Atlantic region and in the African region. In Europe, you would normally work via headings, and you would do that via radio. So you would say, for example, request heading 100 to avoid weather. Now, in the North Atlantic or in Africa, where radar coverage is usually sparse, you would just go ahead and request, for example, let's say 20 miles right off track, verify that, and then you're going to say request weather deviation 20 miles to the right. And then you could send that, and the controller can either confirm it or deny it. Now, I'm not going to send this because I don't want to mess over this air traffic controller over here. I'm already very thankful to him that he is offering to help me here creating this video and to offer his services. Okay, that's 1,000 to go. So, that much about our CPDLC operation. Now, let's go back from here again and back into the CPDLC menu. Down here, the last button, the ATM link status, is just some general information here telling us that we are logged into CPDLC and the hobby network. Now, up here we got the log off button that would disconnect us from air traffic control. Now, there is one more communication with ATC that you will regularly do through this unit. However, that is not found in the CPDLC menu, but in the ACARS menu. And we are going to have a look at that now. So if we go back onto the general overview page, remember, you can just press the ACARS main button down here, and then you go into the AOC prompt and into the pre-flight prompt. This is where you can request your pre-departure clearance. Now, I have to say, pre-departure clearance is a word that somewhat sticks with flight simmers, but it is not the actual word of how this stuff is called in the real world. In the real world, it's simply data link clearance.
744 with you.
Alright, so let's go ahead now and just analyze what we need here. ATC facility is the airport in question. Departure and destination are obvious. The gate is the gate from which you are going to depart, and the ATIS is the current ATIS information. And you just fill all that stuff in, send it out, and that's it. Now this is something European, and it's also done in some other parts of the world, but it's mostly something European. For example, in the USA, you would simply log on to the CPDLC station KUSA, and that would automatically send you your clearance. So the Americans do things a little bit different, but this is how you mostly do it here in Europe and also in some other parts of the world. Now, this is an ACARS function, not a CPDLC function. Therefore, you are not going to find your PDC in your in your CPDLC history. But indeed, when we have a look into the received messages now, you will find your CPDLC messages in here. So if you go into the AOC menu into ACARS, you're going to find both CPDLC and ACARS messages. But if you go into the CPDLC, you're not going to find ACARS messages. Now, unfortunately, I cannot really scroll down much further here, and we've just received a new message. Let's go into that again. So, no further ATC available, monitor Honeycomb 122.8, bye. Alright, let's tell them we're unable to do that. We want ATC all the way to destination. Just joking, obviously we are going to press Wilco, send that out, and with that we are now done with this air traffic controller. Now, either he's going to lock us off or we are going to lock off. Now, in this case I am going to lock off, so I will simply press the lock off button, lock off successful, and with that we are now out of the CPDLC connection. So, this is a very good opportunity to lead over to the radio page, and here we go. So you can see that we are currently on 135.65, and we are now sent over to Honeycomb 122.8. Now there are two ways how you can enter that. First of all, we are just going to type it in, 122.8, and you could just put it right on top over here, then it is going to immediately switch the frequency active. But that way you lose your active frequency. Therefore, my recommendation is not to put it in directly in the top, but put it a line below into the recall. Now you've got the new frequency in, and if you now click the button next to the recall frequency again, that's pretty much your standby frequency. Click that. And now it switches the new frequency active but takes the old active frequency and puts that on standby. And that is a very important thing over here, because it is going to make it possible at any time, but just clicking that button again, to switch back to the previous frequency. Otherwise, if you were to insert it on the top, let's say I would put 123.45 right in at the top, you can see that the previous frequency is now gone, and we have no way to actually recall that. So that's a pretty neat way to handle the radios, and that is my recommendation on how to do it. Now, standard radio tuning, obviously in COM2 you would want your guard frequency 1 to 1.5, and then you'd have COM1 set to whatever you're currently transmitting on. Now, there is another neat function over here, and if you don't have anything in here, and you just click onto the COM1, then it brings you into the preset page. And over here you've got the opportunity to save previously defined frequencies. So let's say, for example, that you were regularly flying into a certain airport. You could use this very page in order to save, for example, the ground frequency or the departure frequency of that certain airport. Now, since I'm flying into so many different places, I'm using this feature slightly differently, and the way I do it is I would save the Honeycomb frequency here, then I would save the guard frequency, and as a third one I would save the in-flight broadcast frequency for the African region, since on a freighter you might be flying there occasionally as well. The way you do this is quite simple. Let's say we want to save our guard frequency. We would insert 121.500 slash, now we need to give it a name, say for example emergency, and then we can go ahead and just save that in here. Unfortunately, there seems to be a little bug that prevents me from saving it, but if you do have a look into the original video from iniBuilds, that is exactly how they did it, and that is how it works. Okay, so that little ding-dong sound that you hear in the background, by the way, that comes from my V-Pilot. That is not related to the A300, disregard that. I did send a couple messages with the air traffic controller to tell him like what I wanted to do for the video, so, and to thank him right now for his excellent services. Okay, so apart from that, this is how you can save frequencies, and then you can just recall them by just clicking the number over here, let's say for example P1, and then you just enter that up here, and that is going to recall the frequency. Might be very handy to include your Honeycomb frequency like that. Unfortunately, I cannot demonstrate it right now, because for some reason it seems there is a bug in the current version preventing this from functioning. Apart from that, on the radio tuning page we got our squawk down here, which you simply enter, let's say squawk 2000, like that, or squawk 2216, which is the one we had previously, like that. You can also tune your ADFs down here, and finally you've got the transponder function over here. Now, this one, you kind of need to know which functions you have available in order to understand how it works. I'm sure you've operated a lot of flight simulator transponders already, so you will have a basic idea, but just a quick summary. You've got transponder functions and TCAS functions. Now, the transponder functions are basically standby, altitude off, altitude on. And then you've got the TCAS functions, which are TA only or TARA. By clicking the button next to the transponder, you can cycle through the active functions. So let's say when you take your airplane on the ground, you're going to find it over here in the standby position. If you now want to turn on the transponder, you just click on here, and you can see it goes from standby straight into TARA. And TARA is not only going to activate your transponder, but it is also going to turn your TCAS on to give you both traffic advisories and resolution advisories. Now, if you want to turn it a step down, let's say for example because you're flying single engine after you've had an engine failure and the procedure demands you to go to TA only, you just click that button one more time and now you get that. If you want to turn the TCAS off completely, click it once more and go into Alt On. Now, Alt On basically transmits the full set of data to air traffic control through your transponder, but the TCAS is turned off. Then you've got Alt Off, which transmits your location and the call sign to air traffic control, but it is not going to send altitude information. And finally, you can turn standby, which is the completely off position. Now, we are going to turn it back into TARA since we are in flight over here. Now let's go on with the rest of the ACARS function. So we are going to go right back into the message log over here, and with the next and previous pages you should be able to scroll through here. Unfortunately, in this case, it doesn't really seem to want to show us these messages, so we just gotta live with the functions that we have over here. But as you can see, you can simply recall any previous message. Now, let's have a look into what else we can do. If you go to ACARS main and then back to AOC, then over here we got a couple more functions. The en route function sends a position report. Now, don't do this, ever, unless ATC actively asks you to transmit a position report. Note that not even when flying across the North Atlantic would you be required to automatically, or rather to manually, send a position report over here. If you are flying North Atlantic and the controller wants to know your position, he can just request it from your plane, and you are not even going to notice that the controller has requested it. So you don't need to worry about this stuff. Now, what's a little bit more interesting then is when you go onto the right side over here. We'll talk about the post-flight menu at the end because it kind of is for the end of the flight. But let's go to the right side over here. So you got the message log over here. And obviously like that you could scroll through the log. You can see up here we got 3 pages. So like that you could just scroll through it and find whichever page you're looking for. Now, the more interesting one, however, is going to be the one below, the weather and ATIS prompt. On here you've got 2 possibilities. You can either request a weather forecast, or you can go ahead and request an ATIS. Now the ATIS is obviously going to be a very useful thing over here. Let's just go ahead and see if we can grab one. So I'll just pick a random airport en route over here, and I have selected the ATIS prompt up here. Note that I could also select META or TAF, and then the appropriate information is going to be requested. We want an ATIS though, so let's send that out. That brings us automatically into the received messages log, and now you can see up here, that is where our ATIS appears. Let's click on it, and you can see Münster Information Tango, Mat Report Time 2020, Automated Weather Message, Expect ILS Approach Runway 25. Next page scrolls it down. Runway News 25, Transition Level 70, and so on and so on. So this is really nice when you are about to call the approach controller. You can simply use this one in order to request your latest ATIS before calling approach. That way you always have the current weather. Now, the ATIS is obviously only interesting for the information that you have currently available. However, if you are looking for some information about the future, let's say a weather forecast, then we could go ahead and request that through here as well. So let's say we are looking for Münster and we intend to use that airport as an en route alternate, which we might only reach in a couple hours time. Then we can request our terminal area forecast down here, send that off, and as you can see, here comes our TAF, and here is our terminal area forecast. So once again, really useful method up here to request your weather information. Do note, this sometimes throws us into the CPDLC menu, so you might just have to click your way around to get back to the other menus. Now, the last one over here is also an interesting one. That is the free text option. If you go on that, we can basically send more or less WhatsApp-like messages to any other aircraft that is operating on the Hoppy network, be it a Phoenix Airbus, be it a PMDG 777, and so on. So the address is simply the call sign of the aircraft and how it is locked in a Hoppy, and then you can just enter any text that you want to send, like hi, space, how are you doing? And like that, you now enter the address of the aircraft you want to send it to, and that's it. Now, here's the thing that you do have to keep in mind. Don't do private conversations over these servers. The entire Hoppy network is completely public. Everyone is able to see anything that's being sent. So if you make wrong usage of this function, you will get banned from Hoppy quicker than you can think. There is active moderation going on in the network, so if you say anything nasty to anybody, or if you just you know, spam somebody or if you abuse somebody, you will be kicked off that network and the entire functionality down here is no longer going to be available to you in any of your add-on aircraft using the Happy network. So be careful when you use this. Alrighty, so that leaves us with one more function, and that is the post-flight function down here. Now this basically gives us some information on our taxi times and so on. So down here you can see the right-hand side has been automatically populated with information from your flight management system. The left side has the data when you went off-block, out, when you went airborne, off, when you touched down, on, and when you got on-block, in. And that is what you can find on this page, which is very handy to fill out the flight log at the later stages of your flight. And like that, you don't need to write down any times as you actually start your pushback, go airborne, etc. But you can simply get them out of the ACARS system at a later point. Really handy feature. And these basically are the main features that we have simulated down here. Now the real unit has a couple more things, like you have a SATCOM main page over here, you've got a SATCOM dial page over here, then you've got HF frequency stuff and so on, but this is not simulated at the moment. Only those on the left here are simulated. Now, really useful, can really recommend you to check that out. You do need a Hoppy lock on, which you then need to enter in your EFB. So if you go down here in settings, then here in the Hoppy field, that is where you can enter it. And once that is correctly entered, then you can use the Hoppy functions. Alright, and that is a basic summary of how all these lovely features work. Now, we're about to reach our interesting little chart tile bug here. Here we go, that's looking better. So we're about to reach our top of descent in a few moments. So let's go ahead and start our arrival preparation. But now that you've got a sound understanding of how these systems work, you will be able to operate your A300 in a much more efficient way. And I can really only recommend you to go ahead and start checking it out and start operating with this. It is a really handy feature that I can only very much recommend you to get comfortable with, because this is how most A300s fly nowadays, because this simply assures compatibility with the modern future air navigation systems. Alright then, I do hope that you found this video interesting. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. And with that, I would like to say thank you very much for watching, everyone. Hope that you've enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to let me know by hitting that like button and leaving a comment to let me know that you liked it as well. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. See you all again on the next one. And if you really love what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.